Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video, we're going to be talking all about sigil making, and I'm going to be sharing with you a slightly different technique than I've used before so that you can learn how to make your own sigils and seals for spellwork and ritual. Those of you who have been on this channel for a while will likely be thinking, haven't you already done a video on sigil making? And you would be correct. About 3 years ago, I did a video on a slightly different form of sigil making. I'll link the video up here for anyone that is interested in seeing another technique. Now that technique uses what's known as kamias. They're also called magic squares or planetary grids. Essentially, they are a mathematical representation of planetary energy that can be used to create sigils in a less creative way. Now, as much as we'd all like to think that we are master artists, a lot of us aren't good at art. And so that technique for sigil making is really good for anyone that finds it difficult to be creative and really enjoys letters and numbers and grids and specific placements. It's good for anyone who doesn't feel particularly creative. Now that form of sigil making is primarily used within ceremonial magic or within planetary magic practitioners, as it does draw in a small amount of the energy of whichever planetary kamiya you are going to be working with. It does have its downsides, however. If you don't want to work with planetary energy, using planetary grids probably isn't the best approach to go about it. It's also quite limited. You can't use whole sentences as it just gets too wordy and too crossed over, and you also can't create unique sigils. If you're using the same grid, the word protection is always going to come out the same, whereas if you use other techniques, you have a little bit more freedom to be creative with it. Now that original technique is still the technique that I use the most, as I really enjoy adding it into larger spellwork and rituals, but it's not for everyone. And after that video, I got hundreds of DMs asking me for other sigil making techniques, and it's only been 3 years, and I'm finally doing it. Now there's one thing I do want to address before we get started. Along with all of those DMs from people asking me to do other videos on sigil making, I also had a lot of people telling me that I was making sigils wrong. And I think it's really important to put this out there. There is no right or wrong way to make sigils. The way you choose to make sigils is going to vary depending on why you need them, as well as your path, your culture, and your tradition. Ceremonial magicians typically will make their sigils differently than artistic witches. That doesn't make one technique right and one technique wrong, it just makes it different. And just because something is different than how you would practice it, that doesn't make the other person wrong in them choosing to do it that way. And I think it can be really disheartening to beginners to hear that the way they're using sigils is wrong simply because it's different to how you would use them. So just keep that in mind going forwards. There's no right or wrong way. Everyone is going to do things slightly differently. You might find that this technique that I'm talking about today will work better for you, but other people might find that my older technique works better for them. There's no right and wrong way to make sigils. Just make sure that you're putting your energy into it and you're being focused. And that's really the goal when it comes to sigil making. Now today's form of sigil making is a lot more creative. If you enjoy drawing, if you enjoy sketching and doodling, this might be the sigil making technique for you. It's something that I've been looking into a lot more recently as I've been getting back into drawing and illustration, and I'm really enjoying using this technique for some forms of my magical practice. And for any of you who watched last week's video, you will have seen this technique being used to create the candle carving that I did on my peaceful transformation altar. Now this technique is really good if you like letting your creativity flow, if you really enjoy being very fluid with your magical practice. It's not going to be for everyone. Some people are going to struggle with that creative process, but it's well worth giving it a go, and the more you do it, the more practice you'll get and the easier it will be. Now this form of sigil can be made digitally or it can be made using pen and paper. I did it digitally just because it's far easier for me to record to put in a video if I'm doing it digitally, but don't feel as though you have to. If you are going to do this on pen and paper, however, I would recommend having an extra sheet of paper ready so that you can figure out which letters you're going to be using. And I will explain that in a little bit. Just before we dive into the technique, I do just want to mention what a sigil is, as although many of you will likely already know, I'm sure there's going to be a few of you who don't. A sigil is a magical symbol that has been created to suit your intention. Usually a sigil is based on a particular intention or goal and has been created by the magical practitioner to be used alone alongside manifestation and energy work, or can be added into larger spellwork and ritual to amplify your intention. Sigils can also be known as seals, depending on how you're going to be using them, and they are created by the practitioner for their particular goal. Now, sigils can be for a particular intention, they can represent a particular person, they can also be used for transference of energies, etc. And if you would like a full video on sigils and what they are as kind of an overarching theme, please let me know and I will happily do one of those in the future. So with that being said, let's start making a sigil. Now, this form of sigil making is probably the most well-known that you'll see out there. It's really, really popular, particularly among TikTok and Instagram, because it's very aesthetically pleasing. To begin with, you're going to need a word or a sentence. Now, you can use a name. If you want a sigil to be a taglock, you can create a sigil out of someone's full name, ideally. Or you can have it be a singular word, like memory or confidence. You can also use a phrase or a short series of words. Now, for this example, I have used any old sentence as my phrase because I wanted to prove that you really can do this with any old sentence. Now, you really can choose anything you want, but obviously the more words you have, the more complex that sigil is going to be. So I would recommend being clear and concise. You might find that one word is too generic. Just saying love or money, if you're going to be using that sigil as a standalone magical item, isn't going to be enough. It's too vague, you might get anything back. If you're planning on using it in a larger spellwork and ritual where you're going to specify your intention further, then singular words can be good. So if you're planning on using this as a standalone sigil, having a couple of words just to make it a little bit more concise and clear is really ideal. So if instead of love, you write amplified attraction, or you might write ideal partner instead of just the word love, because love can be very vague and you might get anything back. Now for this, I typically like to use really short sentences or phrases. So I might use spiritual protection. I might use love yourself, or I might use confidence in speaking. This is a lot more clear than just saying confidence, but it's also a really short phrase that's going to be relatively simple to convert into sigils. Now for this, I did use any old sentence. I find that 3 words is really ideal a length for making sigils from. So once you have your phrase and you've really thought about what it is that you want to achieve, it needs to be clear and it needs to be concise. You're going to want to write it down. Once that phrase is written down, you're going to want to look over that phrase, word, sentence, whatever you've chosen to use, and you're going to want to cross out all of the vowels. Every single one of them. Double check before we move on to the next stage. Once all of the vowels are crossed out, you're going to want to transfer those letters onto the line below. It gives you a more clear view of which letters you've got left. Now from these letters, you're going to want to cross out all of the duplicates. We want just one of each letter that's there. Once that's done, you're going to be able to write out an even more vague version of that original statement that contains no vowels and no duplicate letters. It's likely going to look nothing like the phrase that you started with, and that's really what your goal is. Now you have a choice. You can create the sigil straight as it is, or you can create the sigil within a shape. Now my favourite shape to make sigils in is a circle, but you don't have to use a circle. Any shape will do, but the more complex a shape, the more difficult it is to create your sigil. So for this, I'm going to be showing you a circle because it is probably the easiest way to create a sigil, at least in my opinion and in my experience. So you're going to want to start with a circle. And then you're going to want to sketch in the different letters as best as you can. Now you can do them in capitals, you can do them as lowercase, you can do them as cursive or block, whichever style you find works best. For me, I like capitals and I also like cursive, so I kind of blend the two together into a strange mix. I also largely write in capital letters anyway, so I find that this is the more organic way for me to go about it. It might not be for you, but I find working in capital letters allows you to combine letters a lot easier because capitals often contain a lot of straight lines. Start with a letter that typically draws your interest. I really like working with letters that have lots of spirals and lines, such as L's or R's, because it gives me a little bit more flexibility to add extra letters on top and around it. In this example, I started with an L because it's probably my favourite letter to draw, and then I slowly work out from there. As you put a letter in, you're going to want to cross it off your sheet so you don't accidentally double up on a letter. Once you've done one, you're then going to want to slot in the other letters as you see appropriate. Now, they don't have to be the correct way round. They can be upside down, they can be reversed. You can even break apart letters. So you can have the 3 lines of an F split into different areas of that sigil that you're creating. It's about having the letters there, not necessarily about them looking perfectly like letters. And if anything, splitting letters apart, combining letters with others is a really great way to make it look less like the alphabet and a lot more like a beautiful symbol or sigil. Now, this is going to take some time. You're going to want to play around with it. You're going to want to try and merge letters, separate them, see what works to make a very creative and artistic looking symbol that you can then work with magically. Now, for me, I really enjoy combining letters, so I'll often combine a C into an S. I'll often combine a P into a C, so that way I am not showing all of the letters individually, but they're still represented within that individual sigil. Now, this might take you several hours to get it right, depending on how practiced you are at doing it, and ultimately you are going to come away with a symbol that looks nothing like the original phrase or word that you started off with. This is now your sigil. You can transfer this into your final medium. I typically like doing this in ink, typically digitally, but you can do this physically as well. And I will then transfer it into my candles, into my salt, into my sand, into whatever it is that I am using in further spell work and ritual, or just generally. Now, this form of sigil is really adaptable and it's great to have around because they're very beautiful looking. And so if you are particularly creative, you can make whole artwork out of these sigils to have around your house to offer you protection or good fortune, good health, whatever you might want it to be. Now, I really like using these on candles, as I mentioned and showed in the last video, but I also like using them in further, much larger workings. So I will take my circular sigil and I will place it underneath candles. I will place it in altar spaces. I will burn it during spell work and ritual. And if you would like to know how to use sigils, I will link the how to use sigils video up here. I will, however, probably be updating it in the coming months because it is about 3 years old, and in the world of YouTube, that's quite old. Now, this technique for sigil making doesn't have to stop here. You can incorporate other aspects and other associations in with it. The next example that I used, I created a sigil for the phrase spiritual protection. And you can make these sigils in any shape you want. You can have them raw or without an edge, or you can choose a shape that is associated with your goal and your intention. This draws a lot on numerology and also symbolism. For me, a square, being 4-sided, represents strength, stability, and protection. And so for a protection sigil, creating it in a square is a really good way to add extra association in. A circle is usually a representation of progress, of movement, of cyclical energy, and of replenishment. And because of that, a lot of sigils are created in circles because it does give that very fluid energy. If you find you particularly associate with a symbol such as a diamond or a heart, you can also create sigils in these shapes as well. So a romance sigil in a heart could be a really good way to add extra intention into it. Now, in the examples that I'm showing you, I did create the same spiritual protection sigil in a square, a circle, and a diamond. And although the sigil has the same intention, by placing it in a different container, I have found that the sigil changes slightly. The way you choose to place things is going to vary. And so if you are just getting started on this technique, playing around with different shapes, different boxes, different containers for that sigil can be a really good way to practice and hone your skills. Now, you aren't just restricted to changing the external packaging of your sigil, you can also change the colour. Now, colour is something that I find really important. I'm a very visual person. So if you're doing a confidence sigil, you might want to do it in orange. If you're doing a peaceful transformation sigil, you might want to do it in blue, which is what I did on that candle from last week's video. A protection sigil is really good in black, but you can also do money sigils in gold or romance sigils in red, self-love in pink, whatever it is that you resonate with for that particular colour you can use. And so you can add extra layers onto your sigil making process. So it's no longer just a word that you've turned into nonsense and made a sigil out of. Now it's about the color of that sigil, the shape of that sigil, the container you've put it in. And then we get on to how you use it, how you place it. A psychic energy sigil is really good under a pillow. If you want assistance with divination, add it into your tarot deck. There's so many options when it comes to making sigils, and you aren't restricted to making them in English either. Now, although the majority of people who watch my channel are primarily English speakers, this doesn't apply to everyone. And you can make sigils in languages outside of English. You can create a sigil in English, cross out all the vowels, cross out all of the duplicate letters, and then translate that into a different language. This is really useful for anyone who wants to use runic or Theban. I've got an example here of me using the Theban alphabet, also known as the witch's alphabet, and I've essentially started in English, crossed out the vowels, crossed out the duplicates. The remaining letters I've then translated into Theban, and then used that alphabet to ultimately create the final sigil. This allows me to create a sigil that's even more difficult for people to translate back, and it also just makes it look a little bit more decorative and less like you're using the English alphabet. This is super useful if you do live or reside with people who also practice witchcraft, or who are very nosy and are going to want to pick apart the image that you've created. And also some people generally feel more comfortable creating sigils in this more cryptic way, using runic, Theban, Enochian, or any other language that they see fit. Now, for those of you watching whose language doesn't line up with English in the same way, you can do this with other languages. Oftentimes, you're going to want to start writing it in your own language. So start with the phrase that you want, cross out any duplicates, and then create a sigil from the remaining letters that you have left. So you don't have to do this in English if English isn't your primary language. This is just something that I do in English because I'm English and I'm terrible at languages and I only speak English and a very bad bit of Welsh. Oh, I still remember my German exam from when I was like 14, though it's very outdated. It does still say that I'm 14 and I have no idea how to say that I'm not 14 anymore, but you know what? I tried. So if you're not like me and you're a little bit better at languages and maybe you want to work in your own language rather than English, you can do that as well. It's just that a lot of the information online is written in English, and so it kind of implies that you have to do it in English, but you definitely don't. Now, there's other techniques that you can employ in this form of sigil making. The goal is to take a sentence, phrase, or word and turn it into something that looks completely different. It's a cryptic version of your intention that distracts from the original meaning. The goal with a sigil is essentially to focus on your intention without picking apart your intention. So taking a sentence and then distorting it into a sigil helps you to not pick apart what it is that you're doing and instead to focus on the raw energy of that phrase and what it means to you. So you can employ other techniques as well. You can do the technique that I spoke about in my last video and then take those symbols and transfer them into this form of sigil making, essentially taking an altered version of that phrase and then altering it even further to make an even more beautiful and cryptic sigil. You can also use mirror techniques. Now, this is a lot easier digitally than it is physically, but you can do it physically as well, where you take your container, often a circle, and you would essentially only draw the symbols on one side. Then, once you're done with that, you mirror the symbols on the other side, so you essentially have a duplicated version of that sigil in the two halves of the container. Now, this is the form of sigil that you will primarily see online, the mirrored sigils. This is because they tend to be very aesthetically pleasing. The human eye is really drawn to symmetry, and so if you are interested in trying it, it's well worth giving it a go, and it further distorts that image because you're taking those letters and then all of a sudden they're mirrored and they don't look like letters anymore. It's a really cool approach if you are interested. Now, these can then be used as any other form of sigil can. They can either be active or passive, depending on how you create them. If you charge them with energy as you're creating them, you have created a passive sigil, one that will release its energy over time. or you can go through the destruction method where you create a sigil and then destroy it using fire or water or whatever it is you want to use. And in its destruction, you are charging it, creating an active sigil. It's a really fascinating process and practice, and if you would like more information on sigil making, feel free to let me know and I can always do a full video on it. So that is my very brief guide to making this form of sigil. And I know for some of you it isn't brief, but for me, who usually makes 45-minute long videos, this was pretty brief. I hope that you did enjoy this technique. What technique do you employ? There's so many out there, everything from automatic writing to using planetary grids and Kamias. You can use witches grids. There's so many options. I would love to know which form of sigil making you personally prefer, because depending on what you do and what you practice, you might find that a completely different form of sigil making is going to work best for you, and I absolutely love hearing about other people's practices. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It really means so much to me. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat with the community, feel free to post it down in the comment section, and also let me know what other videos you would like in regards to sigil making. If you would like more information, please let me know and I will happily do my best to create a video in a timely fashion. I know it has been about 3 years since my last video on sigil making. Whoops. I got a little snowed under there, but I'm back now. And I would absolutely love to be able to help anyone else who is interested in learning more about sigils. So enough of me talking. If you did enjoy the magical content on this video or in this channel, feel free to hit subscribe. I try my best with magical content every single week. I hope you have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! Today, I'm a little behind. You might notice my voice is a little hoarse. That is because I have been filming a lot of content that is not for the main channel. You will see soon enough. I'm hoping that I'm going to be filming the announcement video after this one, which is super exciting. But yeah, it's been completely manic. My voice is basically gone because I've been talking so much, filming other things. I'm so far behind. It's Wednesday today. This video is meant to be going out today, and I'm so far behind. I had a pounding migraine yesterday, and I was like, there ain't no way I'm sitting under these filming lights. So I didn't, and then I woke up this morning and immediately put on wet jeans. So you can tell how today is going. I was dedicated to the outfit I had planned in my head last night. I was like, I'm going to wear my favourite shirt, and I'm going to wear my favourite jeans, and I woke up this morning, and the shirt was dry, and the jeans were not, and I just went with it regardless. So I'm currently sitting on a leather sofa in very wet, cold jeans. Fun. Also, I have a blemish right here that isn't going to go away through the entire length of this video, and my hands are orange because my eczema's flaring up because England suddenly decided it was going to be cold. So it's been very manic. Please bear with me. I've got a lot of things in the works that I'm juggling right now because I'm so excited. You have been asking me for them for years, and I am finally delivering. I'm so excited. It's just there's only so many hours in the day, and I'm struggling to get everything done in a cohesive, concise time frame. And so yes, yes, that is today. I'm just hoping I can get through this video in one piece without losing my voice even more than I already have. I have been filming a video like every other day, sometimes twice a day, to get done what I need to get done, and it's taking its toll. I am not a massive talker normally. I just kind of talk to myself inside my own head. So when I'm talking out loud, I lose my voice really, really quickly. So today's agenda, we have a script, except my printer has decided it no longer wants to print double-sided. So now I have just empty blank bits of paper. This could have all been on one sheet of paper, but my printer decided, no, we're going to print on 2 sheets of paper. So that's what we're doing today. Okay, enough chit-chat. I'm going to get going. I have 4 minutes on my SD. You have got to be shitting me. I literally just sat down to film and I have 4 minutes on my SD card. I want to scream. I actually want to scream. Fun. Okay, so this is fun, right? This is great. I just had to delete. Well, no, I've moved and deleted some files in the hopes that that is good enough. I have no idea how much time that is going to give me. It is at least 1 episode of Secret Project number 1, and yeah, I'm just going to have to hope that that is good enough. I don't have the time to be moving a whole bunch of other files, because if you've ever had to move HD video files, you will know that it takes forever, like actually forever. And this SD card contains 202 video files, so that would be fun. Let's try this again. So hope I can do it in one take. I wrote the script mid-migraine yesterday, so honestly it could be absolute nonsense and I won't know until I start. I mean, probably the smart way to do it would be to, you know, read it before I started filming, but that would involve time management and planning in advance, and those two things are not my forte. It looks fine. It looks fine. It looks fine.